Folks, here we are, leading your best life. Today we're talking about education. It's a passion of mine, and that's why I've asked Jette Oksis to come on board. Jette and I have known each other through swimming, and she's a leader of educators. And Jette, welcome aboard to Leading Your Best Life.
Thanks, Leigh. Glad to be here.
Well, you are helping teachers, students, educators, create ecosystems to lead their best life. And I want to drill down onto that today. But what I want to do in the first instance is let's talk about your journey. Where has Jette evolved from? Tell me as much or as little as you like.
Professionally.
Professionally, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I started my teaching career back in 1997, 98. I got my first teaching post. I was the last of the 3-year bachelor degrees. So I was 20 when I graduated.
A baby.
Yeah, it seems like that now. I thought I was invincible at that stage. It was also a year where jobs were quite tight. So we're pretty much told that if you got a job, accept it and be happy. So I put every single coastal school down on my wish list, and I was gifted Walloona, which, as you know, is sort of right smack bang in the middle of Western Australia, in a remote community school. I was so excited, I didn't actually care where it was. I just wanted to jump on the plane and get in there and start teaching. So I think I flew into a town called Mount Keith, and I was the only one left on the tarmac, sitting on my suitcase and waiting for the principal's wife, and she came and picked me up with a couple of the other teachers, and then we drove south to do our food shop, which was in a little town called Leinster. Beautiful green oasis and pool and lovely little shop there. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. Then we jumped back in the car, drove another hour and a half to 2 hours north again, back to Walloona, and I was greeted by a sign on the pub that said "Welcome to Paradise," with palm trees everywhere, all gravel roads, red dirt, quite a culture and land shock for me, coming from the hills in Perth. But I honestly think I reflect back on those days, and yes, it was tough professionally and it was tough personally, but it was also the greatest experience and really helped shape me as a teacher. From then I went down to Kalgoorlie and was teaching in a few different positions, and then I went over to London to teach for a year. In that time I met my first husband, so we went back to Kalgoorlie. I had my 4 children. I worked various different jobs, coaching graduate teachers, mentoring, a little bit of part-time work, and then I went back into the classroom. And I'm just very fortunate, I think, that in every sort of context I've been to, I've been able to be part of decisions and innovation, I guess, to really support our students in a whole range of different contexts. So I went from Kalgoorlie, I was there for about 15 years, and then went down to Esperance, where again I was teaching. I went to Bunbury, and then I came to Perth. And when I came to Perth, I had done a few consulting sort of roles. So I joined the Department of Education in their behaviour and engagement team, which was fundamentally about developing and facilitating professional learning for teachers around classroom management and student engagement. From there, I developed some online professional learning for teachers, and also did my master's in research, which was focused on student engagement, but online professional learning for teachers. And I think in that process, I became really interested in this idea of extended professionality. So they sort of say that teachers can be viewed often with restricted professionalism. And this was a term first coined by Hoyle back in 1970 or something. But my professor at UWA was writing a text about this idea of restricted professionalism versus extended professionalism. So in restricted professionalism, I guess it's similar to the role of a nurse, where they're told what medications to provide to the patients, they're told what to do, when to do it, versus a doctor who has that sort of autonomy and can see the bigger picture and can adapt techniques or things to best suit the patient. And if you put that or apply that to a teacher as a professional, I think that has a lot of weight in not only how we view and value teachers, but also in how we lead and support them with professional learning. So I guess in everything I do now, I go back to that theory of that I'm actually trying to support teachers in their professionalism and extend the professionality of teachers rather than to dictate or prescribe set skills or strategies for them, because ultimately teachers are the ones that need to make the decisions at the coalface. They're in there facing the students every day. They know the students, they know the context. So yeah, I guess that's sort of been my journey, and it's probably now one of my passions is supporting teachers to make those decisions as best they can.
Fantastic. Wow, what a journey, starting with the suitcase. It sounded like Wake in Fright, in the middle of nowhere, the middle of nowhere. Student engagement, online learning, extended professionality. Let's delve down to some of those things, because I mean, in recent times, you've just done a round of workshops, because now you're in the education department. Now you're in the Catholic education, the sex. What do you call that? Government, non-government area.
Different sectors. Yep.
Different sectors. So let's talk about this latest round of workshops you've been doing. What was the goal of that, and what were some of the things you observed?
Well, they're sort of just in initiation. They're actually a year-long process. So we're doing a program called Leading Pedagogy, and it is about not just working with teachers, but school leaders and leadership teams to reflect on what's happening at the moment in their context around teaching and learning. And more specifically, what are the students saying about their learning? Because we can look at a whole range of data sources. We can look at our academic data. We can look at attendance data. We can look at behaviour. But really, when we're talking about student learning, we need them to be involved in this conversation. So that's where we start with day one, and then we provide some time for some deep learning and research. They start developing a hunch of what they think they might need to investigate, and then they start looking at doing an inquiry process in their school. So that's not just them going back and doing inquiry, but also getting support from their colleagues, so a collaborative inquiry approach. So it takes a year for us to get into the data, to start reflecting on their context, to bring in some new professional learning and research, and then to start developing what that might look like back in their school.
Wow. So the student involvement, we say involvement equals ownership equals commitment. So what does that look like? How do you get the students involved?
Well, I guess firstly, it's asking them the big questions. So we use a model called the spiral of inquiry, which was developed by a few New Zealand researchers and educators, which was Helen Timperley, Linda, yeah, I can't remember the name, sorry, but anyway. Then, yeah, their first question they ask is, what's going on for our learners? And we ask our people that are attending to go back and ask their students what's happening for them in terms of learning. How do they know how they're going in learning? What do they not, or how do they know they're progressing in their learning? And can they think of adults in the two adults in the school that believe in them as learners? And so they're big questions to start with, and then we discuss those a little in light of all the other data sources they have. And then they'll go back and hone in those questions a little more once they've sort of got an inkling of what their concern or issue might be about, whether it's about engagement or relationships or lesson design, learning design, instruction, that sort of thing. So
you're reminding me, I literally the other day went to an 80th birthday with a mate of mine who was a lecturer up at Muresk, and one of the founder professors up there had a card from somebody who said, you were the first to believe in me.
Yeah, well,
And he was very proud of that, you know, and of course, as a teacher, that's a super powerful affirmation. So that question you're asking there, and obviously the New Zealand researchers realised somewhere amongst all of their research that that's a powerful concept of someone in the school, or two people or two teachers in the school who believed in them, because they may or may not get that in their outside life.
our own Western Australian research by the Commissioner of Children and Young People also speaks to that, in saying that there's a big correlation between students feeling like they belong and they're connected in their school to their achievement, or to their sense of achievement. So we know that students who are disconnected and don't have those strong relationships, and in early years, it's very much about the adults, but in older years, it might switch to friendships and things. But they do need to know that the adults in the school do care for them and are there to support their learning journey.
So that being the case, how do you facilitate that? Now, I know many teachers. I've got a mate of mine, Chapo, over in Wangaratta, who had a passion. He said, give me the hardest school. He wanted to go to the hardest school in Victoria to test himself in his teaching skills. He's mad. He just does things at 150%. Therefore, I know there's a lot of people who are passionate about doing just that. How do I help as many people as possible? I think of Hillary Clinton talking about, you know, your purpose in life being to help as many people as possible. So with the teachers you're working with, and again, I've done a lot of work with both universities, schools, you know, education charity organisations, TAFE New South Wales, we did a lot of work. And of course, there's a bell curve of people who are absolutely passionate and driven, and people at the other end of the bell curve are going, I can't wait till my superannuation check because I'm out of here. So how do you deal with that? And again, I'm sure when you're doing these workshops, are the people randomly selected? Are they only the passionate teachers in the room? How do you deal with that as a leader facilitating all that?
Yeah, well, the people that come do want to come. They put their name forward. They have the support of the leaders. Often we have school principals in there as well, so they're invested in this process. I think the other point to that, though, is highlighting that whole issue of well-being at work, because when you're connected to your work and you enjoy what you're doing, then naturally you want to do more in the professional learning space, so you're more interested. Whereas there are a lot of teachers and principals and school staff, or any professional really, that's really feeling the sign of the times, which is just the tiredness from change, constant change, as well as the pressures that they're facing. Schools are changing, dynamics in classrooms are changing. There's a whole raft of issues there. It's probably I guess for me, it's about, if teachers attend professional learning, then that's what they want to do. And I always say at the start of my workshops, I firmly believe that what you get out is equal to what you put in. So if you're there just to get out of school for the day and to cruise and listen, that's fine. I'm certainly not there to try and make them do anything more than they're ready for.
Perfect. NLP. I mean, again, when I work with educators, first of all, I say to them, well, mate, I've spent my whole life educating, because sometimes they go, who's this bloke from outside? He doesn't know what we put up with, and, you know, so on and so on. I said, well, mate, I spent my whole life standing in front of groups of human beings, taking them on a journey of learning. So we're all in the same boat. And we know that there's all sorts of judgments go on at the start of the day. What, you know, either why am I here? Who's this bloody person at the front of this person? And somewhere in there is the principle that, mate, learning is not a spectator sport. I mean, you can learn some things by osmosis, but at some point you actually need to apply, which I like what you're saying in terms of, we call it action learning, you know, where you actually learn, okay, go back and apply and come back and report, because we know what's going to happen. You're going to, all your old comfort zones, all your old biases, the ecosystem you're going back into, the resistances, you're going to hit walls, internal walls and external walls. So let's come back and report on how you navigate those problems. So how often are your people meeting in terms of coming back and reporting?
We meet together once per term, so the 4 terms over the year. This year, we're actually trialling where consultants will go out to the school and do a professional learning or a professional conversation, semi-coaching style.
Yeah.
So just asking questions and being there to listen, and then to sort of prompt what the next steps are for them. So that's something that we are developing this year, just because I think from the research around adult learning or professional learning, what we know is that generally it will have more impact if it's sustained.
Yeah.
So if there's and some sense of responsibility over time. But also, I think in terms of adults as learners, we need to be really respectful of whatever information or support we're providing them needs to be contextually relevant. So the conversations that we can have back in school really helps connect the learning to their own context.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're reminding me of the work I did down in Albany with our Youth Futures people. All sorts of things happen. I mean, it's a moving feast on a daily basis with teachers and principals, as you know, kids, students in various issues. You know, somebody gets pregnant or somebody gets sick, and there's all of these moving things going on. So being in there on almost a weekly or fortnightly basis as to what's happening right now, even to the point where, you know, I've found it quite useful to even sit in on team meetings to see how people meet and communicate and make decisions. And, you know, if actions are agreed on, how those actions are either followed through on or not, and then coaching the leaders to, okay, often, you know, as an outsider, you see insanities. NLP, the principles of NLP says, if you ask a fish what's it like in the water, the fish would say, what water? Because it's blind to its environment, you know. And so the same, it can be the case in a school I've seen where insanities are going on, that the principal or the leaders, they know something's not right, but they can't see it because they've lived with it for so long. And then when you articulate it, they go, you're right. You're right. All you've done is re-articulate what they intuitively know. And then you can, and it may be something as simple as, why is the principal taking the minutes? Or the chairperson of the meeting or why are you always being the chairperson? Why don't you rotate the chair so that the rest of the people in the room begin to own the meeting? So of course, that's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that? So have you sat in on some of those things?
Well, I definitely think the smaller behaviours could be signs or signals of the larger school culture. And ultimately, that is heavily led by the principal and the leadership team. Yeah, but also knowing that school cultures take a long time to change. So it may take, I think they say, about 5 years for real school improvement to shift and school cultures to change. But there's other places where you can see that there's a really strong culture in place. And I think because of my journey, having many different roles in different schools over time, I've really been able to see that you get a sense of that right from the moment you walk in. You can sort of, yeah, I don't know, it's something that you feel rather than something that you see, but it's probably made up of all of the little sensory signals that you're getting, and definitely the relationships between staff are one of those signs.
Absolutely. I mean, culture, as you say, whether it's and the energetics, it's one of the things we talk about in our PDC model, the synergistic model, the energetics. What is the vibration? What's something as simple as you say, what do people laugh about, or are they afraid to talk about? I mean, all of those things shape culture, the way we think and do things. What's okay? Is it okay to actually catch people doing things right and say, well, what a great job Mary did yesterday, or what, you know, Bob did yesterday in the class, or do we not talk about that? So
yes, that's probably the difference, is that you know, it's not really my or our job to draw those things out or even to assess the culture, but it is, I think, our job, especially in light of this program that we're doing, is really to help them analyse what's happening for students.
Yes.
And it's through that analysis that they might come to different opinions about how that's come to be. And there is a question in that spiral of inquiry where it says, how have I contributed to this situation? Knowing that it's not, you can't just point the finger and blame somebody else, but everyone in there will be contributing in some way to that situation or the challenge that they can see. So then it's about using your sphere of influence to work out, well, what can I do to make a difference?
Which is, we talk about the ladder of responsibility. You're sitting in blame and excuse and pretending it's not happening, or you're saying there's a problem here. Let's own it. Let's collectively work on it together. In fact, we talk about collective problem solving. How safe is it to have those discussions? So just on that, in your journey, having been in many different schools, what are some of the things you've seen that make a high-performing school, a high-performing education ecosystem?
It's funny that you say high performing, because I was reflecting on that term the other day, and I thought, I don't even know whether we should be using the word high performing, because generally when we say high performing, we're thinking about academic data, and that may be one form of data, but it's not the only form of data. And usually the academic data that we see are the large scale comparative assessments, which in my mind don't truly reflect what's happening in the learning in a school, certainly don't reflect the culture of the school or the quality of the relationships in the school, and ultimately the student's sense of well-being. So there's the big data that may be seen as high performing, but I think high performing is probably, I don't know if there's a better term for it, and I probably need to think about it for a while. What words could we use better? Maybe high performing, I don't know, in learning, rather than, because ultimately what we're about is student learning and student progress.
Sure.
The comparisons across nations and even internationally, I don't know whether they really help schools, because, as you know, there's a whole range of different schools in different school sizes, different socioeconomic areas. It's not to say that a school in a lower socioeconomic area that may have a lot of new arrivals with some children speaking 3 or 4 languages, I think that's incredibly high performing, but it's not measured and it's not reported. So yeah.
That's a whole other PhD.
I remember what your question was.
No, but that's a whole other, the word high performance triggered you. That's okay, but that's just the point. I do remember at one stage us trying to reverse engineer what is the outcome. If you're going to measure a successful outcome in education, what would that look like? And therefore, again, from an NLP point of view, go, well, use the right strategy, get the right result. What is the right result? How do we measure the result? And as you say, there's the macro, whatever those tests are called. What are they called? All those new MAT tests. What are they called, those tests?
Comparative assessments, but they're big data. So, the literacy and numeracy assessment is called NAPLAN, and it's
NAPLAN.
Tested every 2 years from year three to year 9. So a lot of governments and things will push for that sort of data, which has its place, but shouldn't be, in my mind, the only measure that we're using. And I think, I guess at the core of what Catholic Ed is about, and what I really think resonates in our program, is that it's Christ-centered, child-focused, and that whole idea of child-focused and student-centered in terms of making decisions about teaching and learning is what the whole course is founded on. So in terms of what makes a school successful, and I don't know whether you can even measure it in such long-term data, because ultimately, yes, we want our students to turn into adults that have a sense of well-being, that have all the literacy and numeracy skills, along with all the capabilities that will support them to contribute positively to society. That's our big goal. But I think as a teacher in the classroom, or even a school leader, we'll want to see a lot of micro measures or milestones in between. So how do we measure success, or how are we assessing how we're going? And really, we assess when we're in the classroom, or when we're in a school, we're assessing every day whether a lesson was effective, whether that instruction, whether that interaction worked. Or so it's just that constant, I think, information, reflection, feedback, not just waiting for a test result.
Sure. So what would you say are some of those milestones, and whether they may be micro milestones or term by term or year by year milestones that a teacher or even a principal would be looking at?
Well, I guess generally they're looking at if you're looking at academics, you're looking at your assessments that you set and how your students are progressing. But I think what I was alluding to is that a lot of what we can measure in our progress are incidentals along the way. So they're conversations, they're interactions. We can read from students when they're engaged one day and when they're not, and what do we need to do? Where do we need to come in? What's our focus for that day when there's a student that may be really struggling to regulate their emotions? Well, then it's not to sit them down and teach them how to construct an essay. The first priority will be to create a sense of well-being and connection for them so that they're calm and can regulate, and then flip into learning. So yeah, there's so much.
Sure. So these days in the curriculum, I mean, you and I have talked about these things in the past, but the area of, as you say, whether it be emotional regulation or life skills, how much of that is in the curriculum, or is it just an aside that might happen as a result of being in a sporting team? What's going on in the curriculum these days in that area?
It's interesting you say that, because another one of my projects has been for Catholic education, supporting the development of capabilities for learning, which in one of the videos we were using with the pilot schools last year talks about the curriculum, as in what we have to teach, the content and skills, and then there's the hidden curriculum. So all those things that we want our students to be able to do. We want them to collaborate, we want them to be able to communicate ideas, we want them to resolve conflicts, we want them to value other people's perspectives, we would like them to think critically about content and be creative and innovate. So all of those things are not prescribed as much in the curriculum, but they are definitely important. So when we're looking at capabilities for learning, I guess we're thinking of it as a pedagogy. So this is how we support our learners, this is how we teach, this is how we construct our learning to provide those opportunities. And not just the opportunities, but also to create the conditions so that students can learn that way.
Well, you're making me think back. An old teaching mate of mine, Glenn Capelli, introduced me years ago to Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. I don't know if you've come across that. And I thought that was so useful, because knowing that some students, human beings, are going to lean more to some styles of processing information and learning than others, whether they be interpersonal, intrapersonal, as you say, linguistic and word smart versus mathematical smart. What's going on in the curriculum in regard to those things these days, Jette? Anything? Nothing? What are your responses to that?
Well, the curriculum doesn't tell us how to teach. The curriculum tells us what to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So the how to teach is very much about the teacher's own repertoire of instructional strategies and their understanding of different learning theories. And we see a lot of programs at the moment to reduce teacher workload. They're given set PowerPoints to cover a topic, they're provided scripts, and the students read from that and the teachers read from that. Look, I think there's so many different instructional strategies, and it's a highly controversial area at the moment. But what I guess my belief is that the more skills and strategies teachers have, and that the better they're able to understand their students so that they can flex and be adaptive, and not just understanding how students learn, but also understanding the key content and the skills and the best way to share that and engage students with that, because there are different subjects or content areas that lead themselves to different instructional strategies.
Sure.
Versus others. So I think it's not just understanding student learning, but it's also having that really rich bank of strategies that you can draw on, and also knowing your content and skills that you're teaching really well so that you can share them and apply them in a whole range of different ways. I think a challenge for teachers is thinking of trying to apply all of these different things all of the time. When you've got a class of 32 children, and especially for high school teachers that may work with their students for 45, 50 minutes in a day, and then they're gone and they've got to teach a whole new class again. So there's an ideal, but then there's also the pressures of the system and the way that it is at the moment. So we know how students might learn best, but also we need to be very practical to say, well, the real life situation of teachers may not allow them the opportunities to do all of those things as they would like to. So how do we sort of meet in the middle?
Sure. And in the meantime, you've talked about it's quite energetic and exhausting to be a teacher, as you say, lesson after lesson. So I'm going to talk about you now that this podcast is Leading Your Best Life. So let's talk about Jette Oksis, the human being, without, you don't have to give away too much, but we know that you look after yourself. So what do you do energetically, knowing that, well, let me start with what motivates Jette Oksis and why?
I have so many different motivations, Leigh, but I think fundamentally it would be my children. So I've got 4 children. I've raised them on my own for a very long time, and they are my priority. They're my reason. They're also probably the reason that I always try and see what it is that's next, because for me, personal growth is really important. Health is really important. Friends, connections, and learning. So they're all.
All right. So let's just do that, because the health of Jette Oksis, what time do you wake up and what do you do each day to look after? Because you seem to have a very jam-packed life. So tell me your day, the average day. What does it look like?
Oh, look, I've been a bit slack lately, but to be honest, my alarm goes off at 4:15, and I usually let it go off, and then I give myself 15 minutes just to calm and get myself ready for the day. If I haven't, usually I've already woken up before then anyway. I'll get up and do my yoga stretches and things, and then I'll either run or swim, or when I was rowing, I'd go down and row. And then, so usually at the beach or outside somewhere, and then I come home, check on my children, if anyone needs running around, get to work. Then depending on what needs to happen in the afternoon, whether I can fit in a little bit more exercise after work, it's always good. Otherwise, there's dinner and washing and all the other things that make up a busy working mum life.
Talking of personal growth, I always like to ask people what books they're reading. So what books are you reading or listening to at the moment?
Oh, I have a few. Let me just pull up it's quite personally.
Well, you can reveal as much as you like. I can see you blushing, which is hilarious. But okay.
What have I
Are you reading a book? Are you
to?
reading it on Kindle? What are you looking at? An iPad or something?
No, I'm looking at Audible. I've got hard copy books. I've just finished a story by a Western Australian author called Salt River Road.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I read that was because it was recommended by a colleague, and Molly Schmidt is the author's name. Talks a lot about Albany and that area. So you read it and you recognise the places. But also she wrote a thesis while she was doing this book about how to write authentically with Noongar characters in stories. And I think I think that's really important, because we do need to acknowledge the traditional custodians, and when we're writing books from a Wodjila or a Whitefella way, can't ignore Aboriginal perspectives, but how do we do that authentically and meaningfully? So I was interested to see how that translated into a novel.
What else are you reading? Give me one or two others.
I have just finished listening to The Boys in the Boat, which was recommended by one of our directors, but because I really enjoy surfboat rowing, I was interested in that story, which is a great tale of some young men growing up tough in the Depression in America that went on to become the national rowing team and rowed in front of Hitler in Germany in the Olympics and were the gold medal team. So their story.
I've heard about my mate who is an Olympian told me I should watch that movie.
Well, I've been told two different stories about the movies. I was told that if you're serious about rowing, don't bother with the movie. It's a romance.
Right.
Just
the book is better.
Yeah.
The book is how that often happens, doesn't it? That people say there's way more in the book because they have to cut stuff out for the movie.
Yeah. What else? I'm always reading and listening to things. I don't know, Leigh, a lot. Every Moment Matters is on my list. Good, Great, Perfect. I'd really love to read. There's a book that was recommended to me about how we think, and I'm prone to being very self-critical. So that was
really,
yeah. So there's a book by Adam Grant that's on my to read list.
Well, look at that brain, folks. She's just constantly immersing in information, and besides all of that, you're president of the Fremantle Surf Club.
Yeah.
So how do you do all that? How do you fit all that in?
Being president, I've only been president for the year, but it's definitely teamwork that makes that work. And to be honest, I'm the president of a fantastic club, and I'm just following in the footsteps of great leaders before me who do lend out a hand and support and are always there to talk through. So to me, that is a true honour and privilege. I don't know whether I give it the time it needs sometimes. Sometimes I feel like it's just enough, but it's definitely an honour to have that role.
Brilliant. And another question I like to ask is mentoring. If you can just reflect back on conversations or leaders or mentors that have helped you over the years, can you think of one or two situations where, or even people, that person made a significant impact on my life in terms of how I live or how I think or how I teach or decisions I've made? Can you give me a couple of examples?
Oh, there's constant, but I actually had a coffee with somebody just the other week. His name's Ken Peris. He was director at South Metro Education Office when I worked down there. His son's just gone over to compete for Australia in the para cycling event, and he's got another son who was also in the Paralympics as a sprinter. He just has a way of, I don't know, just being there, being open to listen, but also probably shining a light on things and myself that I might not see, and just being, I guess, that beacon to say, you've totally got this, or recognizing strengths in
believing in you, huh?
Yes, absolutely, yeah, and that's really powerful, I think. So
beautiful.
I guess what you've got to do, I guess, is make sure that you are then doing the same to others. So taking that lesson on and applying it for other people. And I certainly hope that I do that.
Shining the light. Another question I like to ask is, what does spirituality mean for you? The inner world. What does that mean for you, the inner life?
I'm a Catholic and I work for Catholic education. Spirituality for me is it's a greater sense of connection. It's something that unites all of us, not just as humans, but all of us in the natural environment. For me, it's something that we can't describe or define. It's definitely something that's beyond words. There's a whole range of coincidences or things that show up, and some people might say it's the power of your thoughts, or but I do believe that there's a lot going on that's greater than human knowledge. But I think ultimately it's the unity that connects all of us, despite religion, language. There's a spirit in there that to me is about connecting with that, finding those moments of awe and joy and wonder and love, that to me is a sign of spirituality.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let me go the other side of this. The area scarcity and fear versus abundance and courage. What is your response when I say that around scarcity, fear versus abundance and courage, and those mindsets?
To me, I guess my first reaction is lived. I've definitely been raising kids without support, so I understand scarcity. But I think beyond that, when we have an attitude of gratitude and hope, then it's not so much a mindset, it's knowing that everything's going to work out. And it's getting through tough times, but it's also acknowledging those tough times, because we all have them, whether it's we're fearful or we actually feel scarcity. We feel like we're just scraping by and surviving. That's real for all of us. So I think that whether it's one versus the other, or whether it's just a natural part of life and it's accepting that those moments come, but it's having some sort of belief or support around you to rise above. And then when you are feeling great and things are going in the right direction, it's sharing that sense of love and things to others.
Beautiful. Talk about shining a light. Do you set goals? Do you write goals down? Do you do goal setting?
Constantly, all the time.
What are we looking for? You're looking for them written down on the desk there somewhere?
Yeah, because I know that they're everywhere, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I'll have little daily goals of things that I want to get done or achieved, like a little to-do list. The other day I sat down and I thought about the next couple of months. At the start of the year, I usually write down a big, this is what I want to achieve this year in all my different domains. And it's just good to go back and keep check of that. Sometimes it's great that I think, I can tick that one off already. Others I keep, it's probably been 2 years in my diary and I think, I haven't got there yet. I'll add it to next year's list. So, yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that. The future for Jette Oksis. What does the next year, 2, 3, 5 years look like for you?
I've given up on life plans.
That's different than goal setting. That's different than goal setting.
It is, yeah. Well, life happens. I do have my big high hopes and things that I want to continue to achieve. I guess ideally I would like to continue to grow and to learn. I'd love to do some travel, but also, I don't know. Just be open to see whatever comes, and when it comes, say yes.
Right. That reminds me of this guy who was the head of Muresk. He said, the answer is yes. What was the question?
Yeah. Sometimes I think that's a flaw I have. I jump in and then I think, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But yeah.
That's part of growing, isn't it? I thought, yeah, the only thing about that particular guy was he got a lot of things achieved, but every now and again the budget blew out. If the answer is yes, what was the question? That's not what the accountant normally doesn't start with that way of thinking. But in the meantime, he's a creator and he makes things happen.
Well, I did decide today that actually if I was going to do anything more, if I was going to say yes or do something or take something on, then I have to give something away, because otherwise I think sometimes my pile of obligation has grown sometimes too much, and then I end up letting myself down or letting others down. So just going to be a bit more mindful of that.
Well, you've got these committees, you've got this podcast. Tell us about the podcast you're doing.
Oh, that's another volunteer role with the West Australian Institute of Educational Research, but it's really about connecting our great teachers and educators and schools out there with our equally great academics. And there's some phenomenal researchers just here in WA, and really to be able to connect those two groups together and see that we're not so different. We might be in different buildings or focused with a different set of students in front of us, but ultimately I think we all want the same thing, and we're all in the same game.
Here. I mean, we want people to, as you say, optimize their potential using education. So Jette, as I move towards a close, is there anything we haven't spoken about that you'd like to talk about, or question you'd like me to ask you to cover, something you think we should be covering before we wind up on this podcast?
No, because I'm really surprised that we talked for that long. Normally, I would have thought 20, 30 minutes, but I think I've covered everything.
Wow, mate, you just opened up. You just said all these wonderful things, not the least of which, as you say, this whole behaviour and engagement. I mean, your master's degree around student engagement. We haven't even talked about well, we suppose we have touched on student engagement. A little tip. What did you find with the online learning stuff that you were working there? What are some of the findings there? Because I mean, obviously online learning has continued to expand, and people often say people start, 97% of programs that people buy don't even get started almost, let alone finish. So what did you learn around how to get online learning to work for students?
Wasn't so much for students, it was for teachers. And
Yeah.
I think for me, the way that was designed was with a lot of rigor around connection and making sure that the information or strategies that we were demonstrating online could be applied in context. They had the time to practice that and then to share it back, and then to have a conversation was the intention of the way that was designed. So I think honouring whatever professional learning design principles or theories the designer knows about, I think you need to reflect in the online professional learning, because as you know, just watching a video and doing a quiz is not going to be impactful.
No.
And when we're talking about trying to make a difference to student outcomes or student learning, yeah, but I guess the other big thing is we need real connection, but also we need to honour that not everyone is confident or competent to navigate technology or even want to be on screens all the time. So how do we balance that? Because we want equity and access for people that are out in remote and regional areas, but we also need to ensure that if they want face-to-face or if they want a conversation, then that's available too.
To build that in, yeah, which is exactly what we do through PDC and other places. Is besides the actual in-room contact, is one-to-one over Zoom, or one-to-one even in office, to go what's going on, what's working, what's not working. And I've got to say, from a coaching point of view, you pick up so much more intelligence around things that can be done by listening to the feedback coming back, or calibrating, when they've tried A, B, and C, and so there's great learnings to be had from a coaching consulting point of view there as well. So, Jette, I do appreciate you spending time with me today. It's taken us a couple of attempts to make it happen, but we've finally done it. All the great work you're doing. I like that. Get a job, accept it, be happy. That was the advice you got as a 20-year-old. Just get the job, accept it, and be happy. And there you were.
Still my motto.
And there you were, sitting on the suitcase, and now here you are, 20 or so, or whatever it is, years later, doing great work, mate. Well done. Pleasure to spend time with you. And this will go far and wide.
Thanks, Leigh. Enjoyed
Thanks,
it.
Jette. See you, mate.
Bye.
Bye.